All right, today we've got a video on the early republic. So when I speak of the early republic, I'm really talking about 1800 till, I don't know, about 1890, 1900, somewhere in there, where America is essentially testing out their new constitution. They're going to go to war during the War of 1812. They're going to go to war against the Mexican government, and then they're going to end up expanding west and creating new states. And hopefully by the end of this lecture, you'll have a good idea of what America is doing throughout the 1800s, and ultimately you'll start to see the division between the country. Politically speaking, through the Missouri Compromise, but socially speaking, through the issue of slavery, the humanitarian crisis that we created through chattel-based slavery, and we'll talk about what that word means. So 1800s, the early republic, coming right at you, and I'll try to do my best to take you through this nice and slow. Here we go. To understand the early republic and to understand the greatest deal of the century, as I'm calling it, we got to understand this man here, Toussaint Louverture. And from Global 2, you should remember that Toussaint Louverture led a slave rebellion in Haiti, and that rebellion was very successful, and so Napoleon Bonaparte of France had to make a deal with America, and the deal was that he would sell his territory, shown there, right in the middle of America, the Louisiana Territory, and he would sell that for a nice little price, $15 million. Ends up being about 4 cents an acre, give or take. And this deal is going to put America in a really good place for expansion. But I just want you to understand, and maybe even ask the question, was it France's land to sell? In other words, you have to understand that Native Americans lived on that land. And to sell their land, to sell their homeland to America is going to create a lot of cause for conflict amongst Americans and the natives. And it was bought under Thomas Jefferson, and the feature and understanding that you need to know is that it was bought through the Elastic Clause. You see, the United States Constitution didn't really have something in there saying, it allows you to buy land. There wasn't like something written there. And so what Thomas Jefferson had to do is he had to look at the Elastic Clause, and he said, okay, well, it's necessary, it's proper for me to expand west. It's part of what we need as a society. We need more land. And so he did it. He decided that he was going to use the Elastic Clause. He said it was necessary and it was proper for the legislative branch to be able to give him the funds necessary to make this deal. And it was such a good deal that the Congress agreed, and so we bought the territory. And the interesting thing about it is, so we buy that territory, France uses that money to try to put down the slave revolt and put down Toussaint. And while they capture Toussaint, they do not successfully put down the revolt. And a lot of the reason why they weren't able to do it is because on the backside of this whole thing, we are selling weapons made in America to the Haitians so that they can fight their rebellion in the name of liberty. So we're making money on both sides of this thing, and just kind of an interesting thing to think about. Now, the Louisiana Purchase, if you're thinking like, oh my gosh, Thomas Jefferson, he's an anti-federalist. He can't believe in something like this, exercising all this power. Well, you have to understand, Thomas Jefferson saw a vision of this country as agriculture first. He called his vision, he wanted everyone to be a yeoman farmer, like the ordinary guy who's got his own plot of land, he lives off the land. He doesn't bother himself with government and politics and what's going on in Washington. Instead, he's got his own plot of land. He's self-sufficient. And it's sort of the opposite, really the complete opposite of Alexander Hamilton's view, which was that we should industrialize like Britain and become this powerhouse and, really try to get factories and cities. Thomas Jefferson didn't see that. And the Industrial Revolution really hadn't kicked off yet, too. So for Thomas Jefferson, he can't really visualize that. So for him, it's all about agriculture, farming. And Thomas Jefferson sends out Lewis and Clark, and I'm sure you've learned a lot about that in middle school, so I won't spend too much time, but basically to say that we explored the land first, got to see what it was like, and then after the surveying of the land and figuring out what's going on out there, people will start to trickle out there little by little. And I just want you to know that it wasn't a perfect marriage between, you know, the land and the settlers. It was a little bit more complicated than that. So natives didn't like the fact that they were being kicked off their property, and who could blame them? And so what starts to happen is warriors come together. A warrior named Tecumseh, who was very, very, very angry because he seemed to sign treaties with the American government, and then the government would revoke these treaties. The government would go around these treaties. People wouldn't be honorable to these treaties, and so he decided he was going to fight back. And he organized a federation, and he tried to fight back. But ultimately, you're going against the American army. They have guns, more guns than the natives did, and it was a situation where, while they did try to fight back, it was an unsuccessful one. Okay, so America starting to figure out what they want to do, starting to want to settle, but they're also starting to make some enemies with the natives. And what starts to happen is Great Britain takes advantage of this. America starts trading with Napoleon. And Napoleon, if you remember from Global II, started a system called the Continental System, where he tried to blockade all of Britain. Well, the British felt like they needed some help, and they wanted help from America, and they certainly didn't want America trading with Napoleon. So what started to happen was the American soldiers, the American, I should say, Navy, are taken from their ships. And Britain engages in a policy called impressment. They begin impressing American sailors into their navy. They basically take our sailors and make them work for them. And there's a lot to impressment, certainly worth looking into, but suffice it to say, it was very difficult to figure out, like, who was working for who was an American ship and who was a British ship, and citizenship was very, very complicated. You know, you had to have papers, and some people didn't, and it's a very complicated issue, but on the basic level, what were they doing? They were impressing our sailors into their navy. They were taking our sailors, forcing them to work for the British Navy, okay? And on the flip side of that, there are also many British in Canada, and they're pushing down, and what they're doing is they're encouraging the American Indians. They're like, listen, you should fight back. You should fight back for your liberty. And when you do, when you fight for your liberty, and you fight against these Americans who are taking advantage of treaties, we'll help. We'll be here to help you. Just like we were in the American Revolution, we'll give you a hand. And so with all of this together, the Americans and the British decide that war is upon them, that they need to go to war to settle this dispute. And so, like the War of 1812, you know that the national anthem comes out of the War of 1812, but maybe you didn't know this. Britain is able to beat our tails. They come in and they burn our White House. How embarrassing that must have been, right? To see your White House, your structure of power burned in front of you. And Americans will technically lose this war. I mean, when your White House is burnt, your main structure is burnt, your capital's burnt, like, you lose. Unless you're America. And in this case, America is able to turn this loss into a victory. And it has a lot to do with a guy named Andrew Jackson. And Andrew Jackson fought at this battle called the Battle of New Orleans. And he used some brutal tactics to get it done, but he fought against the British down in New Orleans. And here's the situation. The Americans are meeting the British over in Ghent to sign a treaty called the Treaty of Ghent. And they're over there, they're talking, they're doing the treaty, and they sign it. They get it done, they get peace accomplished. Here's the thing. Andrew Jackson doesn't know that the peace treaty has been signed already. He's not aware of that. And so he fights on, and then he wins. And when he wins at the Battle of New Orleans, there becomes a legend coming out of New Orleans that the reason why the British signed peace with America is because they were afraid Andrew Jackson was gonna, beat them up, right? That he was gonna be so victorious that they would have lost the war. So that's the legend. It's one that is clearly false, right? The peace treaty was already signed, and then Jackson won. But point is that it inspires people. People become more nationalistic. They call him Old Hickory, right? This stubborn, cantankerous guy. He's very, he's just very stubborn, but he's also a pretty strong guy as well. And we'll do a little story with him in just a little bit. But it gives us this illusion, like, Britain signed the treaty because they were afraid of Jackson. And while it wasn't true, it certainly worked to inspire nationalism. And so what we're going to see is a birth of nationalism after 1812, after the War of 1812 is over. And the presidents that follow, we'll specifically talk about James Monroe here, they're going to take and latch on to this new spirit of nationalism. And they're going to create one party called the Democratic Republican Party. It's a single party system. And we call it the era of good feelings in American politics. We call it that because the country was unified for once. It seemed that we put down our factions and we really started to come together. And so James Monroe in 1817, he is almost unanimously elected, meaning most people voted for him. And nationalism is through the roof. Now, there's a lot of ways to look at nationalism. From a cultural perspective, the government sends Andrew Jackson down to defeat the Seminole tribe down in Florida, a tribe that believed that they should have rights to their homeland, and they fought back against Americans who were trying to take their homeland from them. And it was here where we signed the Adams-Onis Treaty, where essentially what happens is we take over Florida, which had been populated by Spain a little bit, but certainly Spain is on the decline at this point in history. They're really beaten, battered, and bruised, and so any Spanish that were left over, it wasn't much of a fight, and we were able to defeat the Seminoles, who actually were a very strong fighting force themselves. And we signed treaties, and we eventually take over Florida. And just so you know, Florida starts out as a territory, much in the way Michigan's a territory, or Missouri. And the reason why they start out as territories is because there's not enough people to settle that land yet. So once people start to settle it and then they become organized, then you can apply for statehood and become the state of Florida. For now, there's not enough people there, so you wouldn't just make it a state automatically. They've got to sort of earn it in a way. So we're proud because we take over Florida, no matter how vicious the struggle was. More cultural nationalism, maybe the most important thing. So you've got three people there, all Latin American leaders. You got Bolivar, you got San Martin in the south in Argentina, and you've got Father Miguel Hidalgo. Altogether, James Monroe creates something called the Monroe Doctrine. It is a philosophy and political ideology, if you will, political thoughts that he's going to put out, and it becomes policy. The Monroe Doctrine says this: Europeans, you stay out of Latin America. Stay out. Don't come in. We don't want to see you here. Latin America is ours to help become more democratic, to help become more independent, but also, if we're being honest with ourselves, to become markets for our American goods. So we close off this side of the world. We say, this is our hemisphere, and you need to stay out of it. This is our land now. So the Monroe Doctrine starts something. We start to see ourselves as separate from Europe, kind of following that Washington idea of neutrality and staying out of Europe, right? That's kind of the vein that we're going for, at least. So this is after revolutions like Bolivar or San Martin or Miguel Hidalgo, right? These leaders look back at what America was able to do, and they said, we want the same things. We want independence. They look at what the French were able to do, and again, they see that. And so these revolutionaries take hold, and America is able to carve out their own hemisphere. So that's what they're trying to do with the Monroe Doctrine. Hold on to that. Don't forget it. It's a really important concept in American history. All right, other things that I want you to know about. That guy right there in the bottom left is Henry Clay. And Henry Clay believed in economic nationalism, right? He is arguing that Americans need to buy American goods and that they need to use tariffs, a tax on imported goods, to make it so that Americans have to buy American goods. And he also believes in road building and canal building, for example, the Erie Canal, right? Building that so that he can link the country together. But ultimately, the goal is to really get people, if they buy American, our economy is going to do really well. And this kind of reminds you of this Washington idea. You stay out of Europe. Don't need to trade with them. Trade with yourselves. And so you're sort of building on this. So you're getting rid of the factions, you're trying to focus on yourselves, you're trying to stay away from Europe, all of those things, in a way, right? And to a point, we're starting to follow Washington just a little bit more, I think. So, and by the way, tariffs aren't good for everybody in this case. At least from a Southern perspective, the tariffs, they believe, really hurt them. You know, maybe a national perspective, it's great. You know, your economy's going well. But those tariffs make foreign goods more expensive. They used to be cheaper, but because of the tax, they're now more expensive. And if the American goods are more expensive and the foreign goods are expensive, then from a Southern perspective, they're just paying more money, and they don't really like this at all. The Northerners love it because that's where all the goods are made, and so they're making a lot of money. The Southern perspective is, man, I really hate this. This is taking money out of my pocket. More on that in just a little while. You should know that there's some legal nationalism in the way of a federal bank. In McCulloch versus Maryland, a Supreme Court case that you must know, they create through the elastic clause, right, the necessary and proper clause in the U.S. Constitution. They say that a federal bank is necessary to the functioning of a government. And to add to that, in Gibbons versus Ogden, another Supreme Court case, they say Congress needs to have the power that when trade goes across state lines, they need to be able to regulate it. They should be able to tax it. They should be able to put restrictions on it because now it's affecting the entire country. It's not just affecting your state. Now you're affecting multiple states. And when you do that, there needs to be some federal input. And so they say that the federal government can regulate these interstate businesses. And one of the key things that Gibbons versus Ogden sets up is a precedent that you can go after businesses like railroads whom do business across state lines. And you need to have some control over these railroads as they get bigger and bigger and bigger. So Gibbons versus Ogden, it's all about interstate trade, trade across state lines. So it'll set us up for the railroads later on. Now, one of the worst compromises in history, and I won't get into a ranking order of what I think is the worst and second worst, but suffice it to say this. You need to know that there are three parts to this compromise, the Missouri Compromise. Now that land was taken and bought from France, what you needed to do is you need to organize it, eventually organize it in the states. And so they start to organize it, and they get to about 12 and 12. Or at least that's what the compromise is trying to get to, where the amount of free states in the North should equal the amount of slave states in the South. They do that so that the same number of representatives in the Senate in the slave states will be the same amount in the free states, so that legislation when dealing with slavery can be on an even footing. That is so hypocritical and so contradictory, and I won't even get into all of that, but that's why they did it. They believed that they wanted to make sure that the Southern voice was heard just as much as the Northern voice was heard. And of course, the Southern voice is those who own slaves. And I'm not saying everyone did, but enough of them did to make it worth calling out. So they come up with the Missouri Compromise. Here's what it is. They decided that they would try to keep the even distribution of free states and slave states. They wanted the same number of free as slave states. And so here's what they did. They added Missouri as a slave state. That's number one. Number two, they made a new free state. They called it Maine up in the north. That would be a free state. And then they did something terrible. They decided on the Missouri Compromise line, known as the 3630 line, 3630. Any new state that enters the Union above the 3630 line, anything new above it, would automatically become a free state. Anything below that line would automatically become a slave state. And you can start to see that there's more land up north than there is down south, and that this is obviously going to not work. It kicks the can down the road. It was something that everyone could agree upon for the moment, but it's going to come crashing down during the Civil War. I'll spend even more time reminding you about this when we do the Civil War, but for now you got to know the three parts. Missouri, slave state. Maine, free state. And number three, above the 3630 line, all new states would be free. Below the 3630 line, all states would be slave. That's the essential three parts. So Missouri, Maine, 3630. So let's keep moving. Make sure that you've got that written down as we move on to the next one. So, quick story for you. Crazy story. Let's start with young Andrew Jackson. So we're moving out of James Monroe's presidency, and we're going to move steadfast to young Andrew Jackson here. And Andrew Jackson, he is a fighter. He's grown up military. I mean, you know, fighting for the revolution, fighting in the name of Washington, right? And along the way, Andrew Jackson, he's got this brilliant military career. He serves in the War of 1812. He really starts to hate the British very, very much for the simple fact that the British, they killed his family, and he hates the British. He hates them. He also hates the Native Americans who allied with the British, and so it became this real hatred for those who support the British and those who support Native Americans, or just Native Americans in general. So that's where he comes from. He's the son of Irish immigrants, so he starts out poor, but eventually marries a woman and becomes in with the richer of society. And let me just give you an example of, like, you know, who Andrew Jackson is from a personal perspective. He was famous in politics for vetoing. He'd veto more bills than all presidents combined. But he was famous for dueling as a citizen. The story goes that a man by the name of Charles Dickinson, no relationship to Oliver Twist, decides to challenge Andrew Jackson. He says to Jackson, he says, you know, you reneged on a bet, a horse bet. He said he was going to bet, and then he pulled it back at the end, and the horse lost. And then he goes a little further, and he says, you know, the only reason why Andrew Jackson ever married that woman, his wife, is because she was wealthy. Stop right there. Andrew Jackson hears that. You called him out. You called his wife out. Oh, I'm sorry, but those are fighting words. And so he shows up on the guy's lawn. He challenges him to a duel on the spot. Says, come right out. Let's do this. We'll handle it like gentlemen. The story goes that Charles Dickinson fires a shot. Hits Jackson right in the chest. Jackson doesn't go down. He takes his gun, cocks it, fires at Dickinson. Gun misfires. So instead of, like, dropping to the floor, crying like a baby, running, anything of the sort, he reloads his gun, fires again, and this time he kills Dickinson. That's the type of guy we are talking about here. I guess tough as nails, maybe. Wacko, a little bit lunatic. I don't know. He's certainly a different kind of character. And so Andrew Jackson, bullet to the chest, he wins the duel, and decides that he's going to go try to become president of the United States in his life. And so the first time he runs, he loses. And he loses because a guy by the name of John Quincy Adams actually, according to Jackson, runs what's called a corrupt bargain. Basically, John Quincy Adams talks to a famous senator whom you know about, Henry Clay, right, American system guy. And he talks to Clay, and he basically says, listen, Clay, I will give you the Secretary of State job in my new White House if you make sure that I get elected, you know, whatever that means. So, you know, campaign for me, help me, you know, win this election, and I will make sure to take care of you. And so this corrupt bargain between Henry Clay and John Quincy Adams keeps the, I don't know, common man of sorts, Andrew Jackson, out of the presidential office, and that's going to really make Jackson angry. So eventually, Jackson and many of the Democrats with which his party is concerned with decide that they need to fight for the lifting of property requirements. And basically what they're saying here is, if you want to vote in this country, it used to be that you had to own property. Jackson and the Democrats get that waived. And when that happens, when they lift the property requirement, there's no more property requirement in America, even to this day. Okay, you can just vote even if you don't own property. The poor of society come out and they vote for Jackson. They really see themselves as one with Jackson. Like, he's the common man. Like, he gets me. And so Andrew Jackson is able to take over as president of the United States, running on this platform that, hey, I'm the common man. I'm going to take care of you as the common everyday citizen. And so he starts his presidency in, I don't know, the craziest kind of way possible. he invites all of the citizens that have voted for him. And these aren't like, all just big wigs in the White House. I'm talking like, if you voted for him and you were just like an, ordinary guy, you could go to this party that Jackson held. And Old Hickory was celebrating this thing. And so everyone came in, they're partying, and actually the party got so out of control, Jackson has to sneak outside. He has to get whiskey barrels, set them up on the lawn, wait for the people to come out and obviously go to the whiskey, and then he locks the doors behind him, and that's how his presidency starts. Just, crazy stuff, right? And as president, along the way, he's going to do some controversial things, I guess is the only fair way to say this. And some flat out wrong things, if I'm being really honest with you. And he'll use the veto. He'll veto the National Bank. He will pass laws irregardless of the Supreme Court's opinion, which is a total violation of checks and balances. A horrible thing to do, right? The president should never just ignore the Supreme Court and checks and balances, but he does. He passes the Indian Removal Act regardless. So that's the type of presidency he's got, a very controversial one. But I want to talk to you about the end of his life because first, it's just a really good story, and second, it sort of illustrates more of who Andrew Jackson was. So, at 67 years old, Andrew Jackson is attending a funeral. Looks something like this. And he's at the funeral, and a man approaches him, a man by the name of Richard Lawrence. And Richard Lawrence has a gun in his hand, and he decides to fire at 67-year-old Andrew Jackson. Now, the gun misfires. Common, normal thing for you to do as a person is to run away, right? Hide behind a pillar, do something different. At 67 years old, he decides he's going to charge at the man, Richard Lawrence. So the guy, tries to fire again, and again the gun misfires, okay? So Andrew Jackson gets upon him, hits him with his old hickory cane, beats him over the head until his White House aides have to pull him off of the man. Now, later we find out that Richard Lawrence, while he's the first attempted assassination of a U.S. president, he was also a deranged crazy man who believed that his father was like the King of England and Jackson had killed him. This is weird stuff, but Richard Lawrence tried to kill Jackson, didn't work, misfired gun twice, and that's like a 1 in 125,000 odds that would even happen. So I tell my students, and the funny joke is, maybe not so funny, but the joke is that the gun misfired twice. The reason for that is because the bullets were scared of Andrew Jackson. They didn't want to come out of the chamber, right? Of course. No other way to explain it. They looked at the gun later and they didn't find anything wrong with it. They fired it and it fired fine. So just an interesting, I guess, coincidence in history. Something like that. Anyway, what do you need to know about Andrew Jackson? Well, the first thing that you should know about him is that he is elected because property rights were lifted. No more did you have to have property in this country to vote. 2, he was seen as the common man, the hero of the common man, the man who scared Britain so much that they signed a peace treaty. And even if you know better, the people of his time obviously didn't. He used a spoil system where basically he had his buddies come in and take jobs, and his buddies would help him run the country. You can imagine how well that goes when you don't have the proper experience and you're thrust into running a country or an aspect of a country, right? Interesting system. And I'm not saying that he's the only one to use that, by the way. Other presidents will use it, but it's the spoil system is what you call it. A system where you're hiring people who are your friends rather than hiring people based on merit. An embarrassing history to me. I do a lot more with this in class with my students, but essentially this, guys. The Indian Removal Act is something that is passed by Andrew Jackson. It requires that all natives have to move to present-day Oklahoma. Along the way, we'll find that 4,000 of them do not make it, that ferries will charge high prices and people will freeze in the winter. It's embarrassing that we cause the Trail of Tears. Here's what you need to know. You need to know that the Indian Removal Act causes the Trail of Tears. You need to know that. You need to know who's behind it. It's Andrew Jackson. I'd also like you to know that the Supreme Court disagreed with Jackson's decision. They they ruled in favor of a man by the name of Worcester, who had believed that Georgia could not kick him off of his land, his Cherokee Nation land. He said, we are a nation, you are a nation, you've signed treaties with us saying that we should have this land, you can't force us off of it. And in the Supreme Court case Worcester v. Georgia, the Supreme Court said, you're right, Native Americans, you have that land, that's your homeland. And Chief Justice John Marshall said, I'm going to rule in favor of you. Georgia's wrong on this one. But it wasn't meant to be, because President Andrew Jackson, he said, I'm sorry, but I disagree. I disagree that with your decision. I think that Georgia should be able to do that. It's well within their rights. They should be able to kick these guys out. And remember, this is the same man that fought in the War of 1812 and brutalized the Native Americans. It fought against the Seminoles and just gave money for skins. I mean, the guy was brutal towards Native Americans, so it's no wonder that when it comes up in the Supreme Court, he says, no, I'm not going to. I'm not going to enforce your decision. He famously says to John Marshall, leader of the Supreme Court, he says, you made your decision. You go enforce it. Go ahead. And of course, the Supreme Court doesn't have access to an army, so he's basically saying, I don't care what you have to say. He's ignoring checks and balances, and you should understand that. Now, another example where he's going to exercise his federal power is in the Tariff of Abominations. He raises a tariff, and by the way, not just him, it's his Democratic fellows in Congress, and there is some anger in South Carolina. And Vice President at the time, John C. Calhoun, a opponent of the tariff because he's a Southerner, says, listen, South Carolina should be able to nullify this law. If they disagree with the law, they should be able to strike it down and not follow it. And they believe they could do that because it's unconstitutional. So to nullify a law means not to follow it. So that's what South Carolina is saying. I'm not going to follow this law. And more to the point, they said, if you're going to make us follow this law, we'll secede from the Union. We will break away. We will leave the United States. And Jackson gets that message and he says, I'm sorry. Let me clean out my ears. What did you just say? You're going to leave the Union? Oh no, you messed with the wrong one. And Andrew Jackson decides to use his military. And he comes in and he says, I'll enforce the tariff. I'll enforce the tariff with my army if I need to. And South Carolina was like, just kidding, just joking. Maybe we didn't mean to go that far, right? And so, Andrew Jackson, he gets this criticism, and not unfounded, by the way, that he's operating like a king. Like when people disagree with him, he threatens the army. When other courts and other parts of his government say he can't do something, he does it anyway. And he starts to create this illusion that the president doesn't have to answer to anybody, and creates himself to be kind of like a king in many ways. And so there's a real, I guess, political cartoon lash out against Andrew Jackson. Another thing that he does that he doesn't actually have to pay for is Jackson actually vetoes the National Bank. And remember, he vetoed more laws than all presidents combined before him. So he says that the federal government shouldn't have control of all of the money supply. He says the states should do it. And the states are like, oh yeah, thank you so much, Jackson. And so little by little, they start to print more money. Here's what happens. Andrew Jackson leaves office, right? Does his term. And then when the next president comes in, Martin Van Buren, America is in a crisis. They're like, oh my gosh, we have way too much money. We have something called inflation. And it's during the Panic of 1837, there's a huge crisis in America because there's too much money in the money supply. And it has a lot to do with the fact that they just kept printing more and more and more money. So Andrew Jackson causes this crisis, but he leaves the office so he doesn't actually have to pay for the mistakes. From his perspective, he's like, well, things were good when I was president. What are you doing wrong, Van Buren? When in reality, he created this thing. It just took longer for it to start to really catch up with America. So, after Jackson, we're going to get another president. We're going to get William Henry Harrison. And Harrison has fought Tecumseh at Tippecanoe. I mean, Harrison runs on the same exact platform that um, that Jackson's going to run on. He is common man, war hero. He's doing the same thing that Jackson ran on, but his party is called the Whigs. Okay, the Whigs, led by William Henry Harrison, and what Harrison's going to do is he's going to take the oath of office. He'll win. He'll criticize, this system of the spoil system, right? And what he decides to do is give this inaugural address, but it's really cold out in April, and he actually did for about 2 hours, and then dies a month later from pneumonia. I think he just, he talked too long, right? He was out in front of the people too long in the cold, and it really caught up to him. And his VP, John Tyler, comes in and really doesn't do a whole lot. I don't really have a lot to report to you. It's not really a whole lot important, other just to know that the Whigs remind me of the Federalists. I mean, strong central government. You've got your tariffs to protect the North. This is a very Federalist idea of government. So what I've done here is just kind of showed you the change, right, between Federalists and anti-Federalist. And guys, just notice that the names change, but the essential ideas of like what they want stay the same. The strong central government versus the strong state government. Those things that people believe in, they don't go away. The names change, but I guess we're having like the same essential fight that they had in 1776 that they had to today. So the more things change, the more they stay the same, I guess, is where I'll leave you with that political discourse. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about progress in the West. And, to do that, I mean, we can talk about the Mexican-American War. We can talk about some of the things that are going on, in the Deep West, and I think that's what I'll try to do, is try to just bring you through all of these things. So we want territory. That's what we're looking for, and we go to war with Mexico over Texas to get more territory, and we did a whole web quest with this, where you guys go in, you reenact the whole battle. And so I'll spare you the details. Suffice it to say is that we get Texas, we get California, we get all of those, that land to the southeast as part of the Mexican-American War, and we pay for it. We pay $15 million, but certainly there's a lot of casualties and brutality in the Mexican-American War. And Ulysses S. Grant's famous for saying, it really was a war that we didn't need to fight. We shouldn't have fought, but we did fight it, so you should know a little bit about it. All right, now, as progress is moving across, right, we get painting, and students always say, oh my gosh, so beautiful a painting, and so you really start to get to look at it, and you start to see that, she's bringing progress, this angel in white, and she's bringing the Bible, Christianity, and she's bringing technology with the telephone wires, and the trains, and the farming, and then you see the light and dark, the light is America, the dark is this Native Americans who are still hunting and gathering, right? How dare they live off the land? And there's this real sort of like racist undertones that you get, where you see the ethnocentrism of this painting, where America is supposed to be the land of progress, and the Native Americans are really living in the dark Middle Ages, if you will. And so with all of that, you even see some conflict that's going to happen. I mean, you even see they had the settlers have guns, right? The Native Americans have bows and arrows. It's just this real clash between cultures, where perhaps maybe it would have been a heck of a lot better a story had these guys dropped their weapons and really tried to understand each other, or at least respect each other's cultures and each other's way of life, than to take over their land and really see their culture as less than. But I guess I should start talking to you about what's happening west, so that you can get to understand it a little better. So here we go. Westward expansion. Let's do this. Okay. So we got Manifest Destiny. I need you to know what it is. It is the sea to shining sea argument. The idea that America has the right, the moral duty even, to spread from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, from New York to California, right? If you ever heard that song, you know, this land is your land, this land is my land. Okay, this is America pushing west. And when I talk about like where the West is, think about the Mississippi River, and you're just going west of that. So I give you like geographic boundaries, if you will. And the first group we'll talk about is the gold miners, okay? The gold miners of John Sutter's Mill, where gold was first discovered, and the story goes that James Marshall discovers a little nugget of gold, and James Marshall runs to John Sutter, and he's like, listen, you know, John, I found this, you know, nugget of gold, and James Marshall had worked for John, and so John took him aside, put him into a little barn, and here's what John said. He said, listen, I need you to keep it a secret. I need you to not tell anybody about this. Please, please keep this on lockdown, because once you tell people about gold, you know, they're going to be coming and flocking, and I'm going to lose my land. He knew it. He knew that this was bad news if too many people got out and find out about it. So James Marshall assures him, I'm not going to tell anybody anything. You can trust me, you know, like Scout's honor, right? And then he proceeds to tell everybody that he knows. And word spreads like wildfire, okay? Like think of, you know, being in the lunchroom and, you know, it just going all around. That's the type of thing we're happening here. And so the miners come out in force, and they're known as the 49ers because they're coming out in 1849. And so you got this huge gold rush where people are coming out, and they just want you to know, I mean, people came all over the world, Australia, China. I mean, the people are taking voyages of up to 6 months to get over here to try to find gold, because you know how rumors go, right? They just kind of like get out of hand. And so the rumor started to spread that like California, I don't know, was like made of gold, or there's, you know, gold brick roads or something like that. And so all of these, you know, everyone's saying that there's so much gold, you can just pan for it and it's going to be so easy. And then when people really find out the truth is that first, gold is more like hitting the lottery, okay? It's more likely that you're going to find a false rock like quartz and bring that back and find out it's not really gold. And John Sutter, ultimately, he suffers for all of this. I mean, people overrun his land. They over-abuse his land. There's no law. It's not like you can turn to the American government and say, listen, people are trespassing. There is no government. It's a land of lawlessness. And he really loses his land as these miners come in. So poor John Sutter goes back to the East and ends up being penniless and alone in the end. And it really shows you like just sort of this like curse of gold that came upon John Sutter and his mill. So there's a great song by Dan Fogelberg who really talks about the curse of John Sutter's mill and all of the fortune people were looking for, but really it turned out to be that it was more of a curse than anything else. So along the way, as these, you know, miners are out there, you get boom towns. People come to pan for gold. And people come around, and so you need saloons where people can drink and of course, get a bed for the night. And so these towns get built very quickly. They need supplies to be out there mining. And so what people do is they hike up the rates and hike up the supplies so that, because they have, you know, a real monopoly on the industry, there's not a whole lot of people out there. And these boom towns shoot up. And then once the gold dries out of the town, slowly but surely, these boom towns become ghost towns. There's just nobody left to buy and purchase all the things that a boom town has. They're often very violent places. There's not a one person to sort of like look after you, and so you have what are called vigilantes, people who believe in promoting justice for themselves. All right, so we got these boom towns, you know, they're popping up, they become ghost towns very quickly, but you need to know something about where the average American is settling and what they're doing to make it so that more people will settle west. And they're offering, as the American government is, they're offering what are called homesteads. And the way that it works is that you are gaining 160 acres. The catch is that you got to settle it for 5 years. Okay, so 160 acres, free farmland, it's yours, but you got to live on it for 5 years. You got to settle it. And what people do, because they're starting out with nothing, is they build up these things called sod houses. Because there's not a lot of trees out in the Great Plains, there's not a lot of trees to cut down, so you can make like timber houses. So what you get sod houses made out of mud, grass. If you can get some stone in there, awesome. And that's what people are living in. And so they're trying to make the best of the situation. They are trying to make a new life for themselves and for their families. So you've got your gold miners, you've got your farmers, and now you've got your cowboys. And your cowboys, there's a lot of, wanderlust to this, right? You're out on the open road, on the open trails, you're bringing cattle from Texas, and you're bringing them up north to the railroads in the middle of America, or in Texas, and northern Texas, I should say. Really, Kansas is probably the best way or best state that I'm referring to here. And so you take the cattle from Texas, you bring them up to Kansas, bring them up to Nebraska, Wyoming, and some cattle are worth about $40 a head, which is a lot of money. And so you're making a ton of money. You're driving the cattle. You don't have a boss in front of you, in a cubicle where you're stuck. You have an opportunity, really, to make your own wealth, to make your own free living out there. And so many people do. Now, it's not without its bad parts, though. As a cowboy, there's nobody to protect you, so you're protecting yourself from Native Americans, from other settlers. You're crossing rivers, which is really a dangerous thing to do with cattle. You're dealing with the weather, blizzards, thunderstorms, just everything that you can imagine out there. And last but not least, if the storms are really bad, you can get stampedes. And it's just a recipe that, you can get burned on this stuff. So while you can make a lot of money, there's also a lot of risk involved. But if you're ready for that risk, if you're ready for, not having that fine-tuned management, not being settled down as a farmer, cowboy lifestyle might be the lifestyle for you. So there you go. You got the picture, the painting of the stampede. Okay. Now that I've talked about settlement and given you an idea of politics, let's transition here. Let's talk about Native Americans. And out of all the maps I'll show you all year, to me this is my favorite one. This is the one that I like to look at. This is the one that I like to study. It just shows you the amount of diversity in the Native American culture. Just look at this map and how many different tribes there are. So many tribes that you probably have never heard of, so many tribes that I had never really heard of. And so there's so much diversity, there's so many different groups, and so much to really learn. And so while you'll get to do a project on one of these tribes, it goes without saying that they should really take a look at these and really try to understand some of these cultures. In my class, we'll do it, but maybe be worth going out and doing your own research. So, Native American culture. The one that we want to spotlight is the Sioux of the Great Plains, and I guess I need to be very clear with you. When I say Sioux, I don't mean it in the derogatory term that the Americans use, and so I've used that term just to sort of recall for you that's probably the term you were taught under. Their real name, their tribal name, the name that we're going to give to them that's respectful, is the Lakota tribe. You see, Sioux is a derogatory term. It's a mean term. It's a nasty term for calling the Lakota tribe snakes. Okay. It is the Lakota that master the horse. It is the Lakota that master the open terrain of the Great Plains. And it is the Lakota that hunt the buffalo and use every part and every piece of the buffalo. Everything was used. Nothing went to waste. They loved their environment. They respected their environment, and they believed in conservation. That is, to conserve and use everything of that buffalo, down to, the buffalo dung for heat. All of this all of these usages show me a people who believe in taking care of their environment. When white settlers came out, they did not have the same respect for the environment. Of course, polluting it with the steam engines, the iron horses as it is referred to, but they also did something more sinister. The U.S. Army, along with the railroad companies, they destroyed herds, and they did it on purpose. They ran through buffalo herds. Okay, they shot herds from the sides of their railroad. So as the railway is going on, they're shooting these buffalo. They're not shooting them for meat, by the way. They're shooting them so that the corpses will rot and that the Native Americans will run out of food. This is biological warfare. And if you don't believe me, between 1872 and 1875, that's a 3-year window, okay? More than 9 million buffalo were killed. That doesn't happen by accident, ladies and gentlemen. That does not happen by accident, okay? So the Lakota tribe is suffering by this biological warfare that is waged upon them. There's a picture of the buffalo skulls. I mean, it's almost unimaginable that we would do this to a group of people, but we did. So the Native Americans did try to fight back, and they were successful at the Battle of Little Bighorn. Okay, the Native Americans, the Lakota, and some other tribes came together under the leadership of a guy named Crazy Horse, and they started a great victory for the Native Americans at Little Bighorn. They defeated Custer, whom his battle tactics are still in question to this very day. He charged when he probably should not have done that. He maybe shouldn't have met them on the battlefield that day. There's a lot to this battle, but suffice it to say, General George Custer was a loser in this battle. And Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, they lead 8,000 warriors. They outnumber them, the Americans, which we won't say that very often in history, and they defeat George Custer. He was killed. All of his men were killed. They were scalped. And Native Americans, they loved this. They celebrated this. This was like, oh my gosh, we did it! And then within 4 years, they're on reservations, defeated. You see, the Americans, when they hear about General George Custer losing, they hit back with a tenacity, with a vengeance, right? And they're going to come after the Native Americans with fury. The Native Americans respond to this fury with a ritual. You see a prophet by the name of Wovoka of the Lakota. Wovoka is going to show these people to do a ghost dance. The ghost dance, after completing the ritual, it was said that you were invulnerable to bullets. Of course, that did not work. Okay, that in theory it got people inspired. They were willing to fight back, but certainly the ghost dance did not propel or stop any bullets of any sort. But here's where you get it, right? The ghost dance, a people who are trying to fight back and fight back to the last man if necessary. Now, some people fought, and other people were put in different positions. The last tribe to be placed on a reservation was the Nez Perce. And the Nez Perce were talked around as a very proud, advanced tribe, just a beautiful people culturally. Not that any Native American tribes, weren't, but I'm just trying to get you to understand that the Nez Perce, they were just so proud of their culture and their homeland. They loved their land. But the Native American story isn't one that ends in happiness. You see, a man by the name of Chief Joseph has to rise to the occasion here. He has to become the leader of the Nez Perce, and he has to lead his people to safety. He's got a group of some men, many women, and many children, and he decides that instead of being placed in this awful reservation and losing everything, he decides he's going to go up to Canada. And he believes that he can be up in Canada, he can lead his people to safety, they can be safe from the American government and the American army. From the American Army's perspective, they believe that the Nez Perce are just going to use Canada as a launching point to continue to fight against them. And so there's this real back and forth between are they running and hiding, or are they just trying to take advantage of the American government? And so here's what happens. Chief Joseph refuses to surrender. He flees, and after traveling 1,600 miles, he was 30 miles from the border. 30 miles from the border. And he's caught, captured, and forced onto a reservation. Now, he died in 1904, and from documentaries I've watched, they say that Chief Joseph, he didn't die from, gunshot wounds. He didn't die from any other reason other than he died of a broken heart. There's Chief Joseph when he was young, and if you can just look at the pain and the sadness in his eyes, 30 miles away from freedom in his mind, and he saw his tribe be stuck, be forced onto that reservation. He saw his way of life dying around him. That's what he saw. The stories continue at Wounded Knee, December 29th, 1890, when General Forsyth and the 7th Cavalry American Unit and Chief Bigfoot and the Lakota tribe meet. And they meet at Wounded Knee to hash out a peace. And here's, like the battle maps of what they've got. Basically, the point of this map is to show you that they were completely and utterly surrounded. The council is towards the middle of the picture, and you've got troops all around them. And the troops are around. The Lakota are around, and there are some Lakota up on the hill. Okay, they are in tents. They are, some of them, armed apparently, and they were told to take their arms and give them to the American soldiers. Theories abound about what happens next. And I'll tell you this, we're not sure what happened next. But a shot was fired, I can tell you that. Okay? The Americans said it was the Lakota say it was the Americans, and we're not too sure. We'll explore it in class a little bit, and you can make your own judgments. But it doesn't matter who fired the first shot. It doesn't matter, because this was a story that wasn't going to end well. Shots become fired, and again, and then they start to open up in the crowd again and again and again, and a massacre follows. And the men try to fight, the women try to run, and it becomes an all-out slaughter. They run through the woods, women, children, and they're shot from behind. And the reason why I know that is because they looked at the wounds of these women, these children, even these boys, and they looked at them and they said the clothing was burnt. You know why clothing was burnt on their back? Because they were executed. The gun was pointed to their back so close, and then they fired upon them. It's what happens when you treat someone as less than human. It's what happens when you lose our humanity. It's what happens when you call people savages and you go after them like that. Wounded Knee Massacre. One of the more embarrassing moments in American history that I have to tell you about. They gave the men who carried out the Wounded Knee Massacre a Medal of Honor for their service. That's what they gave them, for butchering those people. They put a mass grave there, threw the natives in it, and kept on moving. This is the history of Native American culture that I want to have you explore in more depth. But I don't want you to forget the Wounded Knee Massacre. Don't you ever forget it. So, December 29th, 1890, the U.S. military under General Forsyth met Chief Bigfoot and the Sioux. Shot was fired. 270 to 300 Lakota are killed. 170 to 200 of which were women and children. Bigfoot wasn't there to fight. He didn't have an army with him. 70, 100 warriors. He wasn't there to fight. He was there to sign peace. It wasn't meant to be, though. Apparently it wasn't. After the Lakota are massacred, the American government will pass the Dawes Act. Essentially, they're going to put all these Native Americans on reservations. They're going to make them like Americans. They're going to have to learn agriculture. They're going to have to learn English. They're going to have to learn how to be an American. They'll use force if they need to, but the Dawes Act says you get on your reservation, you learn English, you learn our culture, you forget your own culture, and that's what it's going to be. And along the way, people are going to take advantage of these reservations, all the sorrow that people have, and they're going to sell them alcohol, get them hooked, and then alcoholism is still a problem on reservations to this very day as a result of it. This is bad. Bad, and it's the Dawes Act that really contributes to the reservations that people are being put on. And it contributes to something called Carlisle schools, where young Native Americans are forced onto these reservations, and then eventually they take the children and they send them to schools down in Florida, and the schools teach them to be American, to speak American, look American. They even change their names. For heaven's sake, they change their own names to, you're no longer Crazy Horse, you're now Charles, right? They're changing people's names. They are making them totally American. That's what they want them to do. Dress like American, be American. That's what a Carlisle school does for you. And the last thing that I want to talk about that's occurring during the 1800s is slavery. We'll read about it in class. You'll know more about it. But let me just help you understand it. Give you a frame of reference is all I'm going to do. I'm not going to give you everything. I need a whole nother hour to talk about it. But basically, here's the thing. When you dehumanize somebody, you treat them as less than human, but you do it in a physical and emotional way. And that's the framework for slavery. The slave trade ended in 1808. It was closed. But what we used is a system called chattel slavery. Basically, if your father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, if you were related to a slave, you were going to be a slave. That's chattel slavery. It's an American system. And Harriet Jacobs is a woman that we'll read about in class that lived under this chattel-based slavery. Field work was awful. Physically awful. Emotionally, it was awful. Mass punishments. If someone did something wrong, everyone was punished for it. They made you watch, right? As people were in the buck, where they tied you up. They had a wooden stick between your legs so you couldn't move, and they just beat you senseless with a whip. Just totally the punishments, having to wear these huge metal leashes and collars around their necks so that they could show that these were runaways. I can't begin to tell you how many bad things I've read about. Domestic slaves had it no better. Women were often raped in the home by the white slave owners, and it was a system that Harriet Jacobs lived under. When you read from Harriet Jacobs, I think it'll give you an understanding of the mental toll of slavery. So people decided to fight against it. People like Harriet Tubman, who always had a gun on her. Why? So that there was never an expectation that you were going backwards. She always had a gun. There was never going back. She took many people to freedom, maybe 300 to give you a number. She was a brave woman. She served as a spy during the Confederacy, or in the Union Army's wars. She fought, as a spy under the Union Army, of course, and is a hero, an absolute hero. A man who stood up to slavery was William Lloyd Garrison. I mean, they put hits on him down in the South. They put bounties on his head, mob style. A newspaper called The Liberator, and basically he called out slavery for what it was, an evil institution, a wrong institution. A woman who wrote about slavery, Harriet Beecher Stowe, whom she was inspired by a man who came to her door who was under slavery, and she told his story, and it's one worth reading on Uncle Tom's Cabin. Really shows the horrors of slavery as a young boy watches as a slave whom he actually really was fond of is beaten before his eyes, and the brutality that is cast upon this. It opens people's eyes up. Like, northern people are like, wait, slavery is this bad? My gosh, it's not around them every day, and not that that's an excuse, but it certainly opens the eyes, especially of many women who say we need to fight for abolition. But there's writing about how bad slavery is, and then there's doing something about it, right? Harriet Tubman did something about it, and this man here, John Brown, does something about it. You can call him a religious zealot. You can call him a religious fanatic. You can say what you want about John Brown, but he raided Harper's Ferry in a place where ammunition was stored because he wanted to overthrow slavery. He felt that he needed to wage a revolution. He said, I'm going to wage a holy war against slavery. I'm going to upset the established order. So he went into Harper's Ferry with his boys, with his sons. He asked Frederick Douglass for advice. Frederick Douglass couldn't be a part of this. He didn't see himself as a militant man. And John Brown saw himself as if he wanted to go to heaven, he needed to do something about this horrible institution. It was unsuccessful, his raid on Harper's Ferry, but to the point, he was hanged, but he fought for what he believed in. He tried to end slavery. He tried to do it with a bang. So I leave you with that image of John Brown. There's songs about John Brown. You should listen to them. They're really, really good. They show the real love that abolitionists had for John Brown. He's willing to fight with the Bible in his hand and a gun in his hand. Okay? So John Brown. Thanks for listening, guys. I hope this was a quick review of our unit on the 1800s in America. Have a nice day.